Welcome to So You Can Heal. I'm Abby Parker, a licensed mental health counselor and therapist at Still Point Consultants.
And I'm Josh. I'm a licensed social worker and a therapist at Still Point Consultants as well.
Josh, I am excited to talk to you today about healing patterns because I think it's a big concept to unlearn something. We started the embodiment series with blueprints, like all of the things that we carry into our life, what we learn, how we learn it. And now we've come to the end of our embodiment series to talk about how to create new patterns for healing.
Right.
I don't think we realize sometimes how often things steal our joy. And so when I think of healing patterns, it's how to reclaim that joy, how to bring that joy back into our lives. What do you think?
I have been finding, and I guess my attention recently has really been around like the unconscious parts. So I can totally see that like there are a lot of patterns that we don't see, and sometimes we do. And yeah, they can totally steal our joy. Being raised by a parent who was living with complex trauma, another parent who, neurotic, to be completely honest. And you put those together, like, you're bound and determined to have patterns that are culminations of those things. So a lot of it is like, for me, it is recognizing what has been patterned into me versus like what is really me, and trying to find how in those patterns, like what really is being happy, like what does that actually mean? What does certain experiences, like what does that actually entail if it doesn't fit what I'm used to? So yes, I completely agree that the patterns can totally steal joy, and often we think that it is normal until we recognize that it is something that can be changed. Because patterns are the things that are dictating everything. It's the subconscious. It's the blueprint piece, right? It's the subconscious part that is really running the show. How often we think like, ooh, I'm going to consciously do these things, and then we don't do them, and then we beat the shit out of ourselves for not doing them. And then, with the guilt, the shame, the criticism, the judgment that comes from that, like, it's because the patterns that, like, you're not used to doing it, so it's going to take some time to get used to it. And there are a lot of beliefs that are tied to those things that keep you doing the same things over and over.
Yeah, I find it super interesting when we try and control those patterns. Because we've learned them, we think we have to control them in order to get the exact result that they've given us before. And I don't think life works that way.
No, for sure. And we do the same thing hoping for a different result sometimes.
Sure. Yep.
Well, if I keep doing this, it's going to work. How many couples do we treat or talk to that, well, we've tried everything? Well, have you? Have we tried listening? Like, no. That's critical and judgmental, but it's because I think we feel like we've done all that we know, all that our pattern has allowed us to do.
Mm-hmm.
And within breaking that pattern down and like doing something different, various people will say different things. I think it requires a lot of understanding of where, why, hows type things. Other people don't necessarily see that, which is fine. But I'm also coming from a background in education, so understanding the ins and outs of things is really important. Because I think...
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, yeah, like I think that in order to understand how something works, you need to really get acquainted with it versus, yep, that's it. Like, how is the understanding going to benefit you? Just do something different. Like, I don't think, I don't think we work that way.
And so I think this will be a really interesting conversation between us because what I'm hearing for you is that you see understanding to be a pivotal point in creating new patterns.
Yes. I mean, it has been for me. So,
Right, it has been for you. And so,
right.
like, I was thinking about that and I was like, I wonder what it is for me. And I would say compassion. And I think the reason is because of my own childhood and how sometimes we had to pretend that everything was okay and our sadness or our feelings or whatever was actually going on wasn't seen or wasn't heard or wasn't validated. And so, like, from my experience, I lean on compassion to be able to move into those healing patterns. And so, even between the two of us, we come from different lenses, which is okay. And we can find our own way into our healing patterns.
Right. I mean, I think like the understanding that I seek leads to compassion
Sure.
or can. But yeah, definitely. I mean, and two, like I feel like a lot of that comes from, I mean, my childhood. Like, why is this happening? Like, what's really going on? Like, I need you to be honest with me type things because, like, everybody's not being honest. So, yeah, like, knowing facts was definitely a lot safer than feeling the uncertainty that could come with the emotional piece, which I completely understand is another pattern. I literally went to become a teacher because facts were safe for kids, right? I mean, and now I've learned that, oh, emotions can be safe too. So I'm doing therapy. Yeah.
Well, I think that's a beautiful story to exhibit, like the progression in which we find our patterns, we understand them, we come to terms with them, we grieve them, we seek out a different way to utilize them or like find comfort or compassion in them, and then we do it all over again.
For sure.
So there are cycles, even for the new patterns that we develop or progress into, and then we have to do it again.
Yeah. I mean, I think like it's a never ending game.
Yes.
It's like we create whatever is created, like the patterns that are created are within a certain parameters, like where there it's in the realm of possibility. And then when you recognize that there's more possible, then you have to create patterns that fit that new possibility. And it's so it's just like this continuous expansion of possibility and then creating new patterns and boundaries around what that looks like. I mean, and those patterns may look very different from one person to the next, like yours and mine. And I find that there's a lot of like interpersonal judgment sometimes
Oh,
when
yeah.
patterns are vastly different or understandings are vastly different or yeah, I've been coming against that quite a bit lately, I've noticed.
Josh, something when you were talking that came to mind was the concept of acceptance and commitment therapy, which is like a modality, which I know you've studied. And we've talked about how like accepting a pattern or in the concept of understanding it in order to move through it is really important. How do you think that plays into how someone moves forward instead of avoiding their pattern?
I think acceptance can be a really hard concept. I think there are periods of time where we can accept small pieces of an event, a circumstance, whatever's happening or whatever's going on. Like we can accept little pieces. I often also recognize that due to our own patterns, like even as a therapist, like I am sometimes blinded to or have what are they called? Blind spots, I guess, to certain components that are going on in my client's life because I've blinded to them in my own. I mean, and sometimes it is a dark spot, so it is like out of sight, and other times it is like a light spot, like you have a light on it and you can only see the sliver, but where the focus is there. So I do think that acceptance comes in small pieces and small parts. Secondly, I think that with acceptance, there's a lot of grief, and therefore I think it's easier to avoid than feel upset about what we're needing to change or accept. And I don't know if I'm answering your question. I'm just
You're totally answering my question.
I think avoidance is used often because the possibility is not matching, or the belief in the possibility is shaky. That doesn't mean that it's not there or the possibility isn't there. It just means that because of the pattern I've been in for all of my life, does not see this possibility fully or safe, I am not going to attempt this new thing yet because I don't know if I can trust it. Acceptance is that process of looking at, owning those pieces, like, yep, this is where I'm at. I mean, I tell a lot of my clients, like, okay, therapy's like a road trip. We need to map this out. Like, this is where you're telling me you want to be. Where are we? Because we can't get there if we don't know where we're coming from. So I think that a lot of the beginning of my therapy stuff, I mean, inadvertently, is a lot of acceptance. Like, this is where we are, and this is where the rubber meets the road. And yes, it's really hard to hear. And a lot of the therapy is, how can we be okay with things not being okay right now in order to understand that it's not always going to be that way. And sometimes it will be. And then how do we become okay with the periods in life where things are just shitty? Because it's life, right?
And Josh, I think all of that is super important, because if we think about healing patterns and it not being this glorified, perfect thing that you create and then you just magically do, what you're sharing in the acceptance of being in like very small bites, almost like crumbs, of like breaking it off, taking a bite, moving forward, working with that belief in regards to like what I'm going to trust, or what I'm going to trust today versus what I trusted yesterday, and allowing ourselves to have grief be part of that healing pattern.
I mean, yeah. I mean, it's always there. And sometimes it's just, we're having a bad day. Or, I mean, especially when you're going through a lot of change, like, you're upset, you're more frustrated, you're irritable. Yeah, you're grieving. I mean, I don't think we always connect those dots. I mean, and that's not always the whole case. I mean, but if there's an underlying change, like, grief is always a part of it. And I think we jump past grieving really quickly during change, and we want to see the brightness of the next thing, which is great. And there is a lot of uncertainty that lies in the grieving process of change. I mean, again, facts. So it's really, like, for me, I found that it's really important to understand the foundation of where we're at in order to build something different.
Well, I'm really relating so much to what you're saying in regards to like my own journey, because if I think about my health journey, like, I have really struggled with changes that I've had to make lately. And so with giving certain things up or changing certain things in order to be healthier, which I know I want, but it has been excruciatingly painful and very grief-stricken in order to make those changes.
Sure.
And so when someone tells you to stop eating dairy, I'm like, no, why did you say that? And so it's been a journey to figure out how to do that and why I have to do that and what it means to me. And like those little bites of acceptance have absolutely been part of creating that understanding and that compassion.
Yeah.
But I'm creating a new healing pattern, which I'm starting to become really proud of. And it's also very difficult.
And I don't know of any healing pattern that's not.
Sure.
In some way or another. And I think within the acceptance piece, like, I mean, kind of like what you're saying, like, the awareness component. Like, you become aware of a little, you become aware of a little more and more. And eventually that awareness, I mean, the awareness is possibility, right? So as it expands, you're shifting the structure of your patterns. Sometimes it's just an addition, and sometimes it's a complete demolish and rebuild.
I've never experienced that.
I don't know. Yeah.
No, I'm being facetious.
I
I think breaking it down is really important.
remember it was like I was just started like doing brain spotting. So it was like right around the time I started graduate school. And at the time I was in a pretty abusive relationship. Mentally, it was physically abusive. And like I was stricken with like the most overwhelming insecurities and lots of stuff going on. Anyway, I remember recognizing in a very like profound way, oh, I would normally be doing these things to try and seek some type of connection and control because it feels so awful right now. And I'm not doing that. Now what do I do? I mean, so I think that a part of the healing process was I was accepting, yes, this is a shitty situation, and why are you still in it? I mean, it was for me. And that isn't what you're really looking for. So yeah, like the awareness component allowed me to truly shift what I was doing and how I was responding, and inevitably what I'm picking for myself in terms of like partners and things like that. I mean, and it's completely shifted dynamics in my relationships.
Mm-hmm. One statement or question that I really appreciate in Imago work, in like forming that acceptance and claiming something for myself, or some like whoever is claiming whatever they want or desire, is what I really, really want is.
Yeah.
And to really sit in that, like what I really, really want. And a lot of times we don't give ourselves permission to be able to name that or claim that or work with that. And I see that as a pivotal point in declaring that, like, that next crumb or that next step in a healing pattern.
Right. In that, like, we don't usually allow it because we're usually responding to the extremes, right? Like, it's either I'm super selfish or I'm giving in to everyone all the time, and my needs don't really matter.
Yep.
So
and so whatever those stories are, like when I hear about like that past relationship and you becoming aware of those stories and then how you responded to them within yourself, so that internal conflict, and then you shift in where, like, how you're moving forward, what you want, and you do it bit by bit.
Yep. Yeah, because it would have been completely overwhelming if it was all at once, which sometimes it happens in larger chunks. And I don't know if I would have been able to believe it if it was all at one time.
That's a really good point. So Josh, one thing I did want to share is that Jenna and I have been working on a grief series, which will be coming out next year. And you might see some grief posts on our social media, Facebook, Instagram, in sharing how you can get better connected to the grieving process as you heal.
That sounds fun.
Yeah, we're super excited about it. What we're hoping for people to get out of this is an opportunity to come to a space where they have permission to acknowledge that there's various types of loss, and that they allow themselves to work on those bits of acceptance into naming what they know, what they trust, and what they're releasing.
That would be really good.
Josh, I really appreciate us being able to talk about pattern healing today.
Yeah, me too.
I know that I'm even going to take some of the things you talked about today and think about how I can integrate them into my health journey.
Word. Yeah, I'm going to listen back to it as I edit it and be surprised that I said most of it.
Acceptance. You can accept your wisdom.
Right, yeah. Yeah.
Good to be with you today.
You too. And as always, feel free to check out our website at www.stillpointhealing.com. You can check out our Facebook, Instagram, and Pinterest at Still Point Healing. And you can always email us here at the podcast with any questions at soyoucanheal@stillpointhealing.com. And a invitation to all those listening, please subscribe, rate, and review our podcast, because the more rates and reviews and subscriptions we have, the more present we can be for others. And if you already have, many blessings and thanks. And until next time, bye.
Bye.